All right, we're back. Dynasty Trades in 5. I'm Clay.
Shane.
I'm Scott. I'm ready to start talking some startup strategy. This is going to be my first Dynasty League. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, so tonight we figured we'd have a conversation around Dynasty startup strategy. Obviously, this is we're getting the startup season. Everybody's getting that itch. So we're just going to go over our general thoughts, how we're going to go in and approach these Dynasty startups this year. We're going to go off of just like a general kind of run-of-the-mill super flex, 12 teams, start 10, maybe a 1.5 tight end premium, but nothing crazy. What's your plan, Scott?
Yeah, so happy startup season, everybody. This is the prime time to do it. This is when most people have their rookie picks for this upcoming year in the draft, so that makes it even more fun. You can build even more flexible teams. Disclaimer, make sure you know your scoring, know your settings, know your roster rules, know your waiver rules, all that stuff. Like all of that can change player values. We talk about it all the time where it's like, well, if it's this league or this type of league, we're going to do this or we're going to do that. So even though we're talking 12 teams, start 10, tight end premium, standard scoring, know your rules, be able to see if there's any places to exploit. But, for this, I think we're at a point where, if you're drafting right now, people are still really iffy on the 2022 class because it's got some good players, but people are scared of the quarterbacks, scared of the running backs, worried about some of the injuries with receivers, and just generally the class is down, which is why all the time we're talking like, the last video we were having debates on the 104 straight up for like a 2023 first. And like, that's a deal we would even consider, with what we know right now. But I think you go into these drafts with two strategies. One, if it's a start 10, how many times have you heard us say start 10, give me the best players? Like this isn't necessarily the spot where you want to just trade down. A lot of people, they like to trade down, but then they end up just trading down for extra picks. Maybe they get an extra second, a couple extra thirds, some more startup picks. But they get to a point where it's like, wow, I've built this team and I have 20 players in the first 13 rounds, but they really don't have any high-end players. So they immediately after the draft, they go, well, I have 20 good players. Who wants to do a 2-for-1? Who wants to do a 3-for-1? Who wants to trade 2023 first for this wide receiver? Because I have 10 of them. It's harder to do. Start 10. People are usually chasing the top-end stud. So I think now, keep that in mind. But I think the moves to make, if you can trade down, it's move down with maybe only one tier. You're falling down one tier where you think like the quarterbacks are or the wide receivers are. That if you can get the extra 2023 first, I'm okay doing the 2-for-1s. But what I've seen is that's hard to do. 2023 firsts are going straight up for like 5th round startup picks. So you're really not getting a lot of equity. You're looking on the clock going, man, there's a lot of players that I would pay a first for. At least it would be within the range. It's not that great a value if I'm doing a 1-for-1. So if you can move down from like the 2nd to the 4th or the 5th and pick up an extra 23 first, then okay, I'm okay doing that even in a start 10. And I want to try to cluster my picks within like that top 8-10 rounds. Like I don't really want to get extra picks outside of that because then I'm going to want to consolidate. But I think that it's hard to do. There's probably half the people in your league are looking to do that same thing. So we talked about it on a few videos ago with just the general strategy, pivoting off of the consensus. What is everybody doing? Everybody's chasing the future picks. So you could go into this and say, I want to do two things. Maybe I'm going to bet on the 2022 class. I'm going to take some extra 2022 picks in the startup. But I'm also going to move my 23 first, all my picks next year maybe, and get as much startup capital inside that top 8-9 rounds as I can, and then play the board there. Maybe I move around and I pick up, an extra 9th when I trade back from the 4th to the 6th or something like that. Like you can move those ways. I just think you got to be wary of what everyone else is doing and understand the market is so high on the 23 picks. Unless you can get in a league where you can grab a bunch of them, you might want to think about going the other way.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the ADP. Scott brings up a good point. Like, I don't care if I'd rather make no picks after the 9th round, to be quite honest with you. And there will be people in your league that are go, oh, no, I'm really good at drafting. So I'm going to get all these 11th rounders and build this really good team. Like, all right, you're going to build your team around Cortland Sutton, Rondell Moore, Kareem Hunt, Rashad Penny, and Christian Kirk. Have fun with that. Like Scott said, you're going to end up with a bunch of mediocre players. It used to be pretty plain and simple. You would just trade back, right? And you'd accrue depth. I don't think any smart people have done that in a few years, though. We don't care about the depth in the 10 and the start 10. That's not where depth really starts to come into play. And get those quarterbacks early. It sounds simplistic, right? but I know there's a bunch of people that like to tell you to like just the shotgun approach with quarterbacks. Like, oh, I'll get one good one and then I'll just get every other one that's out on the market. I will sell my soul to move up and get 2 first round picks so I can get 2 top 10, preferably 2 top 8 starting quarterbacks. I can fill in every other position. Finding that top end elite quarterback talent's a lot harder than finding the other positions.
Yeah, you stole my question. I was going to ask if you're on board with the strategy of moving up into the first again after you select one of the elite quarterbacks, paying up to get a second stud. Where's your head on that, Scott?
We were all about this. I mean, obviously we didn't have this channel last year, but we were all about the 2 elite quarterbacks last year because you could exploit it because people felt they could build quarterbacks with the rookies that were coming in last year. It just seemed like it was a lot more of a flush landscape last season. Whereas now, like, it really does kind of drop off at like QB 14 or 15. And I think most people have acknowledged, hey, like, I probably am not going to win my league, especially in a standard league like this, a +4, -2 league. Like, you're not going to win with the quarterback 20. I don't care if they're a starter every week. You don't really want to be starting the quarterback 20 ever. So the gap between even like a Russell Wilson and Baker Mayfield is massive. Like, it's almost not even worth getting Baker Mayfield back in that deal because he's a suboptimal play in the lineup, period. Like, you don't even want to play him. So if he has any dynasty value, you're looking like, what's the lowest common denominator I can replace that spot with? Who's the cheapest quarterback? This came up in the Patreon chat today. Someone said, like, okay, who do I want out of these like 8 quarterbacks? And it's really like, they're my QB3. Give me the lowest valued one that maybe can give me some starts. Like, I'm not paying up for a quote unquote secure third quarterback that doesn't really have any upside, which leads to, yeah, if I can trade up, if you can estimate, you can go through, pull up DLF's ADP for Superflex or just pull up the regular ADP, which I tend to find is a little more accurate because it's a bigger sample size. You can just eye where that talent really flattens out. It's somewhere like in the late 3rd, 4th round. And it's like, there is no difference between the 310 and the 508 in a startup, assuming you already have your quarterbacks off the board. If you have 2 of the top 10 quarterbacks already, you really don't have a lot of value. You're going to see there's not a lot of value when you get on the clock at the 310. You're like, okay, my team's not going to look that much worse if I pick at the 310 versus the 508, especially if I'm picking a receiver or, we've talked on other shows. Okay, I'm going to pick Joe Mixon because he's my RB8. The 508, I can pick Aaron Jones because he's my RB18. There's not a big difference. Your team is not going to be constructed different if you have Aaron Jones versus Joe Mixon because you already have your quarterbacks locked in. So I think you have to do this early on before the board presents itself. We've all been in startups where it gets to like that dead point, right? And then people are like, I'm not trading up. Why? Why am I going to trade up 8 spots? The guy I'm going to get has a really good chance to fall to where I'm going to pick in 8 spots. But when you send somebody that offer, hey, I'll give you my my 207 and my 407, and all you need to give me is your 106 and your 905. And you're going, oh man, that I'm dropping from 4th to the 9th. Like, that sucks. But then you look at the 2 quarterbacks you're going to take when you get your second first. You're going to much rather say, okay, I can find a decent player. I can find a decent player like Juju, or I know Shane doesn't like Cortland Sutton, but I can find a placeholder. Yeah, I can find a placeholder receiver or a low-end tight end 1 at that range. Now, it's not going to like make or break my team, but I've already built my team around the quarterbacks anyway. So I think you can exploit that because people overvalue those mid-round picks. I mean, how many times have you guys seen startups where the guy trades back and back and back? He doesn't pick till the 3rd, but then picks 7 times between the 3rd and the 8th. And he's like, oh, I got all these assets. And it's like, okay, well, if you pick players with all those assets and you don't accumulate picks or extra value, what do you have? You just have a team of a bunch of solid players. If you miss on who those solid players are in February, you're in trouble because you probably don't have a lot of trade liquidity because that's the range where people really don't care who the players are.
Yeah, I hate building a roster where I don't know who to start week to week. Yeah. Like, I want it clear cut. Like, and this is basically the whole conversation here. Is like, I will take 2 monster wide receivers and then a bunch of dudes because I know, look, it doesn't matter who I start out, a bunch of dudes, because they're all going to give me 10 to 12 fantasy points every week.
We're kind of scared of running backs, right? Like everybody is high on going wide receiver. What are your thoughts on doing a startup where you smash the running back market? Do you think that's going to be something that's going to be a little bit of a pivot against the grain?
It is, but it doesn't mean okay. So I'm all about going contrary to what everyone else is doing, right? But I don't think you do that like driving in the wrong direction. Like that's contrary, right? But that's really a bad idea because you're just going to smash into things and probably burst into a ball of flames, which is basically how I feel about when you go running back heavy. Like the one thing I do like that is in most drafts, I don't think, well, it hasn't, at least not through last year's startups. People weren't hit to the whole, I'm just going to get monster quarterbacks and build everything else out. If everyone's hip to that this year, well, they'll only get 4 good teams and then we're screwed. Maybe I'll pivot to running back, but unless running backs start to fall into like the 4th round and it's Dalvin Cook and I know I just said I don't want a descending asset, but all right, I'll take Dalvin Cook in the 4th round, but I'm probably going to stay far away from him. Even if you build right, there's too many injuries. It's just that it's going to happen. You could pick Jonathan Taylor and Austin Eckler, and for all anyone reasonable, anyone sane, you'd go, oh my God, that team is going to smash next year. That's like 60 points, maybe not 60. That's like 55 points a week for my running backs. Like I'm just going to kill everyone. And then one of them is going to get an ankle sprain. The other's going to blow his knee. And then Shane over here, who drafted Leonard Fournette in the 10th round, is going to start, or whoever the next Leonard Fournette is, and he's going to put up 8 running back a week, 1 weeks. So I'm probably staying away from running back. I like to hear what Charles says here about going contrary to me.
Well, first, I had a great analogy. It was going to be, you've always heard the saying that communism's a great idea until you actually try to implement it, and it doesn't work. But Shane's analogy of just driving the other way on the road, that takes the cake. But no, I don't think that you can go into a startup draft and just say, okay, I know that all these running backs are going to fall, because it'll happen. There'll be guys where you're going, wow, like, I keep saying Aaron Jones, but he's like the bottom end of the quote unquote, like higher end starting running backs. He's like at the bottom of that tier just because there's still some ambiguousness with the Rodgers situation, and he's 27 and there's AJ Dillon. So like he's at the bottom end of that. So he can fall, maybe like the 6th round, just because it's not because he's not good. It's just because people understand what type of asset he is. This is where the dynasty community has gotten smarter. They understand not that he's not good. Everyone sees him on the board for at least a round or 2 and is going, maybe that, that could be a great value. But in past years, someone would snatch that up in the 4th round. And that's the pick where you're going like, you're not going to take him. Yep. But you love to see the other person take him. You love to see like, okay, great. That doesn't disrupt my roster construction. And as a guy I wouldn't take. So it pushes more players, to me with my next pick. People are getting a little smarter now. I think you can exploit still the elite quarterbacks because sure, everyone will be willing to trade up for Josh Allen, Justin Herbert, Mahomes. But after that, like there's a little bit of a stink on like Kyler and Lamar Jackson. There's people that don't think Joe Burrow's that great. Like he's not elite. He's very good. Like they'll take him in his spot, but they're not going to move up a couple picks to get him. People hate Deshaun Watson still. Russell Wilson, same thing. So, you could build a team without even having to trade up. You could build a, Joe Burrow, Deshaun Watson team, and you don't even have to move your picks. You can probably do that from like the 108 to 205. You know what I mean? Like you could probably make those 2 picks and you've achieved that. Now that's a risk on Watson, but you don't necessarily have to trade up to do that. So I think people are off, just everyone trading up to get elite quarterbacks. I don't think that's going to be as hard as you think. It's like Shane said, though, you may have to take a little bit of uncomfortable risk to do it, but I'm willing to do it. Where I'm willing to be a little more liberal would be, with locking in, if you just take your team and you go, okay, I'm going to lock in 2 top 8 quarterbacks and an elite tight end. And I hate drafting tight ends in only 1.5 premium. But if you told me I could somehow leave a startup draft and get, I don't know, Darren Waller in the 3rd or Darren Waller in the 4th or something like that. And I'm just running out 2 elite quarterbacks and an elite tight end. I now have, hopefully, everybody else in my league, at least 9 of 12 teams, topped every single week at those 2 positions. They don't have a lot of other players to make up for it. And I already know that the running backs are going to fall a little bit. There's going to be a running back or 2 that fall. a Zeke, an Aaron Jones, like those guys are going to fall to a place where maybe I'm not there to pick them, but I can move up 6 spots to take them if I really wanted to, give up a future third or, swap a couple rounds from now and do that. But I think you can really build around. I don't think I'd have the balls to go tons of running backs though.
And that's the problem if you try to build around elite running backs, right? You are going to have to trade up to do it, to get the ones that hold any value beyond a year, that are insulated beyond a year, I should say. So if you wanted to trade up and get Jonathan Taylor and I don't want to say it, but like Cam Akers, I wouldn't do it. But Javonte Williams, maybe you want to trade up and get Javonte Williams because he's young and he's going to break out. And then, or you also trade up and get DeAndre Swift, and you build your team around Jonathan Taylor, DeAndre Swift, and Javonte Williams. And you're like, you know what? Even if this goes bad this year, at least I can trade them next year because someone's going to want these running backs, although it's going to be at a much lower cost. If I'm looking to trade them, most likely, like just go out there now and try to trade DeAndre Swift. That's one thing is don't forget, like we get in the startup drafts and we forget that they exist. Like these players exist outside of that startup draft. Like we're in leagues with these same exact players. We have some of these same players you've tried to trade away and you've seen what happened.
If you're drafting a running back, I don't care if it's a rookie that hasn't played a game. If you're drafting a running back high in a startup, you better be planning to win.
Well, yeah.
You don't draft Jonathan Taylor to go, well, if my team goes south, I have the best trade asset next year, because you just wasted literally a year in his dynasty prime.
But my only point is if you are going to go this devilish running back heavy strategy, they better all be young. So there's some insulation there. I don't think it's a great idea anyway, drafting any running backs ever. I think I've made that pretty much known by now. But if I am going to draft them, I don't want to put that much capital into them. So I don't know. We got to find someone that's willing to do it.
Yeah, and you don't want to give up your 23 first either. Right. If you're gonna trade up and get all these running backs, don't give up that 23 first. You need that in your back pocket.
Well, I mean, if you're going to draft, just think of it this way: if you're going to draft Jonathan Taylor in a startup, you're doing it with the pick range where you would have had to take a quarterback. Mm-hmm. Or B, if you're going to draft Jonathan Taylor and you're not really confident that you're going to win next year because of maybe how else you're building your team,
better move him immediately.
Just draft Kyle Pitts. Kyle Pitts can have the same exact season next year. He'll be worth as much or more as he will next year, especially relative to his position. He's literally bulletproof. Now, people are going, he can't be my tight end one because he's not going to produce like a tight end one. But that's not what we're thinking. Like you can waste a year of his career, barring he doesn't suffer like a torn Achilles or something like that. Fast forward 1 year, he will be going at the same spot in the startup that he is right now, period. Like there's not really, and you're not going to feel like you lost a year of his prime because he's probably not to his prime yet.